that really strikes me about Rose's work is that she's showing the beauty in darkness and in decay. And when you come into my space, it's a lot brighter than in her space, but it's the same thing. For me, I find beauty in the dark places and in wearing and aging and that sort of thing. So as you look at the paintings, and I also find it really funny because when people walk into Rose's space, some people know her as a photographer. And so they were like, oh, where's the photos? And I'm actually a ceramic artist. So when a lot of people came to my show, they were like, where's all the clay? And I'm like, well, I do still do clay. I taught high school for 16 years, ceramics. I grew up in Western New York and moved to Worcester to actually go to the Craft Center's professional program in clay. And I did that for 2 years. I also worked at the Worcester Art Museum, the Ecotarium, and then I taught ceramics. I started painting again after about 15 years, I guess it was. In 2015, I did a show here with Brian Burris. We did a collaborative show where it was some of his work, some of my work, and then some collaboration. This gallery was open, and Louis offered me the space, and I decided that I would try it. So most of the work in here has been done in the past 2 months, I would say. There's a couple from 2016 put in, but most of it is done in the past couple months. The title of my show, as you notice, it is in French. It's the way the French say, you are missing from me, or I miss you. The reason I chose that as a title is because I've had a lot of loss in the past couple of years. And not just beings, not just humans, but also philosophies, ideals, routines, whatever it may be. There's a lot in this world that's kind of in upheaval. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily that I was missing it, but that it was missing from me. I lost my sister last October, and I realized I don't see her every day. I didn't even keep in contact with her on a constant basis, but knowing that she's not there. And so I realized what it is she's missing from me, not that I necessarily miss her. And so all of this work was painted in that time period with those ideals. When I paint a painting, I usually attend to it 4 or 5 times, depending. I call them visits. When I first started painting, I saw painting as visual journaling. I didn't expect anyone to see any of my paintings. When I was in college, I would do figure painting, oil painting, and that sort of thing. We'd have critiques, and I would just sit there and say, okay, I like the critique, but I don't really care. And since then, now I'm in a place where I paint by myself, and I do love the feedback. So before I go any further, I do want to make sure if everybody could sign my book. I left a little question there. Constructive feedback is very welcome, but I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that. So any feedback is great. So if you notice, as you walk up to the paintings, they'll have many, many layers on them. And one of the things that I always say is if it sits around too long, I'll paint over it, because it's not who I am anymore. This is who I am right this moment. And as they go out in the world, I just hope that they bring people the joy of looking at them where you don't just look at it at once, that each little space has another section for something for you to see in it. And my motifs or my imagery has come from just working over and over and over and over again. Sometimes the canvas shows up, sometimes I have something that just comes out. You will notice in a couple of them, not so much in these here, but there's a dotted line that you'll see going through some of them, and that's all about communication. That's about the objects, souls, beings, whatever they are, how they communicate to each other and to the environment. So, like I said, I don't think many of these have that, but a lot of my older work did. And that goes back to, I do a lot of stitching. I used to do a lot of paper collage with stitching that had a lot of that. And I was laughing because I didn't realize where it came from. And I was like, what is this that I'm doing with this stitching? And I was laughing because Mark Lynch in my interview, he was asking me about it. And I realized it's from The Grinch, where his heart expands and then goes boing. And that is my sort of, I try to dig back and figure out where some of these come from afterwards. I try not to evaluate them too much while I'm painting them. While I'm painting them, it's just about the aesthetic value of what you see. So I don't know, I'm trying to think what else I need to tell you. So I also do ceramics. So I am going to have a show at Arts Worcester in the fall that's going to be a combination of ceramics and painting. I don't know. So does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Combining the clay with your paint?
I do.
Okay.
I absolutely do. I've been building these sort of totems, and I used to do ceramics that were functional, but I like to teeter on the edge of things that are functional but don't look functional. So it would be something like a cup or a dish, and you look at it, it's sculptural, but you could actually use it.
Yeah.
And I went to three-dimensional ceramics after art school because I kind of thought of it as it's a three-dimensional canvas. And you have to have something very appealing to bring it up to your face and to drink from it. So that was the aesthetic that I was shooting for with that. When I started painting again, I was painting with Brian Burris, and he's more of an atmospheric landscape artist. So that's where these sort of generated out of. And my ceramics now have gone more sculptural than functional. I've been building totems out of clay, and I paint sometimes the exteriors of them.
And how about Arts Worcester?
I'm actually going to do.
Clay on the canvas.
It's hard because these are actually fabric canvas, and they can't take a lot of weight. So it's my way of integrating them for the show in the fall is I'm going to be doing like a set design where I have paintings as backdrops, and then I'm making an environment for you to go through. And each piece has its own little sort of story behind its title and this and that. So if anybody has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that.
So the paint is all acrylic?
Most of it. I paint exclusively in acrylic now just because of the fumes.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore oils. There are 2 oil pieces, I think just 2, in here. The little one in the corner over there, and the little one on the end over there. But I started working with acrylics because the toxicity was less, and I'm terrible with brushes. Terrible. And I tend to use a lot of mediums, like matte medium, gloss medium, things like that. So you'll notice part of what the ceramic thing brought to my paintings was in ceramics, you can have a matte and a gloss surface, and I played with that idea like matte black and shiny black, that sort of thing. And so you'll notice in the paintings there are areas that I've used to make them shiny in contrast to the matte.
Do you paint and work in clay at the same time, or do you designate time, like 3 months?
Sometimes. I mean, I was teaching ceramics in high school ceramics for so many years that a lot of my ceramics work I was able to fire at the school and kind of delegate doing it there. Now in my studio I have like a clay section and a painting section, and depending on what I'm working on, it kind of oozes over to this one and then it oozes back. And I also do, printmaking, bookmaking, sewing, jewelry. I mean, I was talking to Rose about it, and I said, I find that the true artist is somebody who gives them the material and will make something out of it. So you never know what you're going to get. Yeah. I love this one too, and it's funny because I haven't had that much feedback about that one, but that one I really like too. Yeah. And one of the funny stories I like to tell is about poppies, which is this one back here. My son's 12, and he gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was working the night before, and he came down and he said, "Mom, I love this one, but it needs more dots." And I said, "Okay," because he's my only critique, I'm like, "Come on, come tell me." So I'm doing dots, and I use different items for different size dots. And I do every dot. So I'm like doing dots, and he's like, all right, do some more dots. I'm like, okay, so I'm doing dots, and I'm like, okay, it's 3 a.m., I'll do a couple more dots, get some sleep before he gets up. Doing dots, the alarm goes off. It's 6:30 in the morning, and I'm repeating dots all night.
I can relate.
So it was lovely because, you know, it just goes to show the time just gets eaten away when you're doing something that you enjoy.
You were in the flow.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, I'll ask my question.
Yes.
It's not exactly a question, but I noticed that finally, I looked at everything, it's like everything seems to have a horizontal line.
With this series,
That, I mean, even this is
Yeah.
horizontal, but
yep.
yeah, so I mean, like, everything's got like a.
Well, that came from-
or a transition, or how do you describe
Well, that
it?
came from, like I said, the show I had with Brian Burris. He's very landscaping, atmospheric, and what we did was we traded paintings. So I would take his atmospheric paintings and paint on them. And that's how I started with sort of that general idea of an environment. And I also think that what I'm trying to do is create an environment I want to live in. Like, I want to be in painting, and so that's what I paint, is what I want.
So there's not, or is there a deeper significance, like a transition or like?
Well, yes, always, there's all of the issues that you have in heading towards something and what's in the background and growth. A lot of times you'll see in my work these like sort of orbiting bean shapes, and I make those out of clay too. And those, everyone's called them everything from a stomach to a liver to, I call them pods. I think of them as pods or seeds, but I think also the cord off of it is about connection and about the idea of an umbilical cord and being connected to something and it being broken off. So those are around in a few things. And then the series over here is something that I had just started, which informed this painting, which is the idea of hurdles. You know, you going over hurdles and what comes. But a lot of people have said it reminds them of Cristo, who did the in Central Park, what do they call it?
Gates? The gates?
The gates, yes, that they thought that sort of reminded them of the gates. So I see them as windows or doors or hurdles. Do you know Rothko? They're like color field paintings. So when you look at them, they could look like 2 rectangles or 2 squares, but it actually is landscape informed. So it's not literal, but it's very landscape. So sort of like, I don't know, you know, any of them, like even the one on the postcard. It's not a definitive horizon line, but it is horizontal. And why I like the square ones, I don't know. Did I do okay?
You did great. You did super.
My head kissed the ground. I was half the way down, treading the sand. Please lift a hand. I'm only a person with Eskimo chain. I tattooed my brain all the way. Won't you miss me? Wouldn't you miss me at all?